Alright, Travis Wingoodsell. Got a whole bunch of ideas this morning, I guess. I've been hearing on the news throughout this coronavirus about how schools are going to function. If they're going to go online or if they're going to get kids in the classrooms, and how do they do it with a viral pandemic? And of course, as they claim that the schools are all safe and cleaned, ready for the students. Then the students go, and boom, an immediate escalation of the virus. And so many are now being forced to go online. But then you got to figure out, okay, well, we're going to have to give these kids computers so that they can do it online. And that gets into a dilemma when you realize that parents have to have the money, and they don't have the money because if they had the money, they'd already have the computer for their kids. And obviously, whatever job they are extorted to work at during a viral pandemic is not paying them enough to allow them to purchase a computer for their kid. So either parents are getting squeezed to make sacrifices to get their kid a computer so that they can be educated, but then at the same time the kid needs somebody to watch out for them depending on their age, babysitter or daycare, but you can't go to a daycare during a viral pandemic. And so parents then are again squeezed and extorted to decide between getting their kid educated, saving them from the virus, stay at home, or there's really not much of an option. If the parent goes to work and the school's closed, what does the kid do? And so all of these things should have been figured out in advance, and they were. Just nobody wants to do what is necessary. But the dilemma that people are now having is at-home learning really good enough as an educator? Or do they need to be in the classroom? Well, the answer is it doesn't matter. It depends on the method of teaching. When my brother was born, he had colic. And so he had to have my mom's constant attention. And so I, as the firstborn birthright blessing son, was all of a sudden ignored. And so my mom, realizing that she needed me away from bothering her for attention, they had a TV, and Sesame Street was now available. And so I would be sat in front of the TV while my mother would spend her days with Todd. And so my first education, which was my mother, as she would read to me, "Are you my mother?" And then I was then able to read it, and they had a little audio film recording of me, which has now been thrown away, and thanks to my dad. But the educational medium now changed, as it was no longer my mom who was my educator. It was now Sesame Street, and eventually TV, as my mom realized, hey, I can just dump my kid in front of the TV and I can do whatever else I want. And so, as a stay-at-home mom, that involved changing all the diapers of the other siblings, and feeding, and clothing, and bathing, and laundry, and ironing. Because back in those days, we didn't have permanent press. Every item of clothing had to be ironed once they were Levi's. But going to school for kindergarten all of a sudden changed. Now I had a stranger who was educating me and teaching me things that, Sesame Street already taught me all this. And then they were also trying to teach me how to be a transvestite. Vest referring to clothing, so transvestite is switching from male to female clothing or female to male clothing, and it's different than gender identity, and it's different than sexual sexual orientation, and it's different from sexual surgery, transsexual surgery. I was educated in New York, on the difference by those involved, and so there was a big trunk, similar to a pirate's treasure trunk, that was just stock full of children's clothes, both male and female thrown in there together. And as children, that was part of the education, is to see how well we're able to dress ourselves and undress ourselves, I guess. But I'm hearing what could potentially be the UPS guy, or it could just be the mailman. Waiting for confirmation, auditory confirmation. It appears that it is the postman, so we're good. But as we go through the grades, it becomes just a sit down at a desk and listen to the teacher talk as she draws on the chalkboard, as I am blinded, and so my height put me at the back of the classroom, which made it practically impossible to see the board unless I did some squinting techniques, which, that was too strenuous on the eyes. And so it was a matter of listening to the teacher, never actually reading the textbook unless we were forced to, like a story or something in it, or do the problems in the text. But it became clear that it was just memorization as my education. And it didn't take too long to realize, as I began to actually skim through the books, I'd catch what my teacher had said in class. Oh, okay. That's how it works. They're just reading from the textbook. So then why do we need the teacher? Can't we just read the textbook, have the textbook as a reference book? And and then not too long, there were arcade games. And one of them, not Double Dragon, it was like Dragon's Lair, I think it was, where it was somewhat of a D&D, I think it might have been a D&D game. It was a story game, where you're the player and you get told a story and you go and search and on a quest and stuff like that. And that was the big game. It cost 50 cents rather than the regular 25 cents. And it became a major craze, and people were starting to make money by playing in competitions for the various games that were out there. And I even won a Space Commando award badge by reaching a certain level on my Atari game. But cool. And so that became a different means of education, as the Simpsons episode about Bart being sent to a military academy, but all they did was see how well they could play video games, which ended up being actual real-time war scenarios. But yeah, the military does look for those who are good at video games, especially the first-person shooter games, because that helps with the new technologies in the military. And when I went to the University of Utah and asked if they had a Hebrew program for a Hebrew degree, they insisted, "Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, we'll get you signed right up for it, blah, blah, blah." Turns out they don't. Not enough classes. And they tried to incentivize me to go into Arabic, which would be included with my Hebrew degree. And the purpose was that I could get a job working for the CIA, because they need translators. So yeah, I left that program and went to Eva Vasilevska in Anthropology of Ancient Middle Eastern Cultures. Don't con me. But these different educational types of learning and educating give me a greater understanding on what's going on for coronavirus. As teachers are wanting to keep their jobs, obviously, so of course they have an agenda to keep the status quo of in-class learning, or have computer systems so that they can communicate with the kids. You don't need teachers. You really don't. Because you can create computer programs now. You can create computer games, and there already are, that are educational, that can teach children all of the various educational fields: government, history, economics, math, science, all the sciences. You can do it in a computer game, and just depends on the child on how they're able to best learn. Some may be readers, some may be auditory, some may be hands-on, and some may be games through direct applicable apprenticeships. And so instead of trying to conform kids to an educational type of system, it really should cater to the environmental circumstances under this coronavirus. As they need to say, okay, well, how do we get a computer in every child's accessibility, rather than trying to trick a coronavirus into making school safe to sit at a desk with a teacher at the front of the classroom. And they're not thinking about the future technology, nor are they thinking in terms of an emergency viral pandemic mode. But to apply it to the church, that's the one thing that surprised me. Now, all these months later, I'm now starting to see YouTube channels for stakes or wards that finally figured it out. Hey, why don't we do our sacrament online so that those from our ward can participate online so that they can stay home and not expose themselves to the risk of getting infected? Novel concept. I'm sure I just can't figure out how nobody could have figured that out but some guy named Travis in the beginning. But the church kept insisting that this virus was taking away Mormons' agency to assemble at church, to be educated in the chapel classroom. And it's the same process, but it's just religious education. And technically it's scientific if you go back to Joseph Smith's True Mormonism. Nonetheless, church wants to be Christian, and so they can only think in terms of, oh, we have to get people at church, at the temple, on missions. They can't think outside the box, especially during an emergency situation, such as a coronavirus. And so when you read your Book of Mormon and you realize, oh, Alma and Amulek were talking to the poor Zoromites, telling them they don't need a church to worship God. You think prophets would know their scriptures and thus are in their leadership position because they know the scriptures and follow the scriptures as their example. No, they don't know. They have to consult with others at BYU as to what the doctrine is. Oh God. And so, yeah, the field of education is not a complicated one. You just have to say, we can't let our establishment hold us back. We can't let the economy hold us back. We can't let tradition hold us back. So, it's not complicated. Don't force Mormons to expose themselves to a virus. There is absolutely no need for the church to be open right now. So just make sure that you get every member a computer system so that they can access the internet